So welcome. I'm excited to be here with Dwayne Clark of Aegis Living, founder and CEO. Dwayne, thanks so much for joining.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I see you're in your home office, which is where we all seem to find ourselves these days. You know, really excited today to talk about leadership and leading through crisis. I know that word crisis is thrown around a lot right now, and leadership is, but even months into the crisis, people are still looking for ways to manage, get through, get better, prosper. And I think you've got some really fantastic ideas around this, and certainly the proof of what you guys are doing there at Aegis Living. So for people who don't know Aegis and haven't yet heard you, can you tell me a little bit about Aegis? Who are they? What do they do? What do you guys focus on?
Yeah, so Aegis Living has been around. Actually, we celebrate our 23rd birthday here in about a week. We have about 42 luxury senior housing, primarily taking people with dementia and assisted living needs. We're approaching 3,000 staff. We have probably about $3 billion in real estate assets. It's a privately owned, family-owned company. I was the founder. And you know, it's a company that's often referred to as the #1 in our category. It is, we're very focused on culture. And so we get a lot of interviews, a lot of brand awareness around how we treat people and the uniqueness of our culture. We've been voted best company to work for multiple times. Don't quote me. I think it's 12 or 13 times we've been voted best company to work for. By a variety of different periodicals. We were at one point one of the top 5 fastest growing companies in the nation. We're always one of the biggest family businesses in the state. But I think I'm most proud of the fact that our culture is so unique. We were the first healthcare company in the history of Glassdoor to be ranked as a Glassdoor top 50 company. And that's out of 650,000 companies that were nominated. So I'm most proud of the fact that we have a very employee first, a very progressive culture. And I think that bleeds into, you know, our service, how we care for staff, how we care for our residents, how we treat our families, the stance we take on political issues, the stance we take on, you know, things like Black Lives Matter or immigration or whatever. Because we really care about people. That's our business. We don't make widgets. We're not selling products on Amazon. We're taking care of human lives, and that's the most prestigious, worthy job anyone on this planet could ever have. So I'm very proud of our company.
You've got thousands of staff. You've got more in development. When in the history have you, as a leader, gone through something like this where you had to be this creative?
You know, there's a lot of fear during the 9/11 situation where people just thought, you know, you saw a plane in the sky and you thought it was going to fall on your head, right? So there was a lot of fear then, and you didn't know if you were going to be bombed or, you know, what was going to happen. And then we had the Great Recession. And, you know, for people that really, the baby boomers have never been through a huge economic crisis. You've been through some minor downturns, right, where the stock market corrected, or, you know, interest rates went into inflation in the 80, or gas prices soared or whatever, but never were you through a 6-year recession. And, you know, that was one of those things where you just said, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there's light at the end of the tunnel. My mom used to say, keep walking through the darkness because you'll eventually find light, right? And so you have to keep walking through the darkness because eventually you'll find light. And I think that's where we are today. You know, when you get in a crisis like this, I think economics go out the window. You know, profit goes out the window. Your first concern always has to be the safety of your staff and your residents, right? And so, I mean, we assign process owners, you know, for all the vital issues, you know, technology, PP&E acquisition, you know, communication strategists, people that looked into disinfecting protocols, people that work with the CDC, people that work with all our local research agencies. And in fact, Seattle has some of the most phenomenal research agencies in the world. The Gates Foundation, the Fred Hutch Society, you know, University of Washington, they do all the institutional modeling for the White House. So Institute of Disease Modeling is in Seattle. So we started contacting all these people and say, we want to be the smartest company, the safest company in the United States around COVID. How do we do that? And so, one of the things we did is we formed a virus council. Now you may say, well, what the heck is a virus council? Well, we went out and got some of the smartest, most intellectual professionals around this subject, and we formed this council of 7 people. And they have virologists on it. They have people that are working on vaccines. They have people that are dealing with the psychology of fear, psychologists on it. We have geriatric specialists that are dealing with the issues of the elderly and how COVID affects them. We have traditional Chinese medicine people on it because herbs have been a big treatment in China with helping COVID people survive. So we formed this very eclectic virus council. And it's been brilliant. We had our first big meeting here just a few days ago, and people who are working on the cutting edge of technology and again vaccines and how to fight the virus did presentations. And so you have to pivot in times like this as a leader. You have to, if you think, hey, I'm going to go back to the way I was managing 100 days ago, you're going to be left in the dust. You really have to be smart and think about, okay, how do I take advantage of this situation in the sense that not take advantage of it to make yourself, more profit, but take advantage of it in the sense that I'm going to be the smartest I possibly can about this issue. And, that takes creativity. I mean, we had to design outdoor visitation living spaces. So, we actually designed an outdoor living room that was appropriate through plexiglass and so on, so people could come in and visit. We had to pivot and design Zoom rooms for people to visit. Now we're working on a sleeveless, it's a hugging platform where you can reach through this plexiglass and actually through these sleeves, like you'd see in the neonatal unit, and hug your family member, because human contact and touch was so important, right? So I think in these days and times, Aegis is no different than a lot of people. The only thing I think different is how we approach this. And we approached it in a very, very creative way, very aggressively. We didn't worry about, the cost of PPE and technologies. We've invested probably over $1 million at this point in the last 90 days, just in making sure our residents were safe. We have 7 months supply of PPE. I don't know any hospital or any retirement home or any nursing home that can say that. So we're very aggressive in terms of making sure people are safe. And when you give people safety and comfort, your staff, that's 80% of the game, right? Then people say, God, these guys are huge advocates for us. They really try to take care of us. And I think psychologically, you need to do that for your staff. And, just speaking on the staff issue, one of the process owners was about what do we do for staff? Because people are fearful, and they all of a sudden their kids are at home. They're not going to school. What do you do if you have 3 kids and you have to work? So we said, all right, we're going to set up a task force on childcare. We're going to set up a task force on food. So you don't have to go to the grocery store. You can go home. You can take dinner home for your whole family of 4, for $1. We set up telemedicine. So the whole entire family, if they got sick, they didn't have to go to the ER and expose themselves to COVID. They could do it on telemedicine and make sure if they had to go to the ER, the doctor was telling them, okay, you have to go now. So I think you have to be a huge staff advocate right now, because culture is so important. And, one of the things that we've seen in our industry and in other industries as well, if you don't have a good culture in these stressful times, your staff are just going to leave. They're just going to go home. They're going to find another job. They're going to go somewhere else. And we've put a lot of money in the culture bank over the last 23 years of our existence, and that's served us well. We haven't had staff that didn't show up, So we've earned that privilege of staff devotion and dedication.
One of the things that I've read about you, and Barbara actually asked this here, that you've been talking about something, leading with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Barbara's curious about what that means.
I remember interviewing Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, This is, probably 20 years ago. And he said something that I never forgot. I was interviewing him for my very first book, which was called Help Wanted. And we were talking about employees. And I was saying, how do you get great employees? Starbucks has got a great reputation, blah, blah, blah. And he said, Dwayne, you have to remember that employees, when they come to a new employer, they enter our gates with an inherent distrust, right? And so our job is to get them to trust us. And what are the trust points that you do that's going to let their guard down, right? What are the things that you can do to make these people trust you? Well, you give them an office, you give them a paycheck. Well, that's the ticket to the game. That's not really going overboard, right? So, for an employee of ours, when a new employee comes into our corporate office, we find out about what their loves are, what their desires are, what their hobbies is, what their families is. And then we make up a gift basket around those issues, right? That this is their loves, their hobbies, their goals. Maybe they collect, some kind of trolls, or they love baseball cards, or they love the Yankees, or, they're into horses or whatever. So the first thing they get on the first day is something that says, I see you. I see who you are. And then, it's a matter of how we lead, right? And so you can lead by objective, you can lead by direction. But what's even more effective is to lead by vulnerability. And what I mean by that is you give of yourself, you share of yourself. Hey, as a CEO, let me tell you the biggest mistake I ever made. And this was colossal, and I'm ashamed of it and I'm embarrassed of it. Hey, let me tell you about growing up poor and how that felt. Let me tell you about when my mom had to steal potatoes from a restaurant so we could eat for a week. Let me tell you about, having bad credit when I was in my 20s. And you may say, well, Dwayne, why does a CEO have to say these things, right? Well, as a CEO, I have to say these things because I want a relationship with employees. I want people to have a connection with me. And too often what happens is, we think we're the CEO and they think you're the CEO, and you have this big chasm between you. When I've taught at several major universities, and I have this one slide, and it's got the CEO standing on one big cliff of a mountain, and then this big chasm, valley, and then the employee standing on this other cliff. He's like, hi, I'm the CEO. And he's like, hi, I'm a potential employee. And they say, well, how do we get to each other? And they say, I don't know. Because that's the chasm or the mentality that exists between a potential employee and the CEO. I want people to relate to me. So they may see me get emotional. They may see me cry 3 times a year. They may see how passionate I am about things. And, by the same token, I want to be, able to, be able to see them as well.
Lots of great points. Let me also bring this back to this term of over communicating. Bob has typed in here that you've talked a lot about communicating with your staff, telling them stories. Is there a point when employees are just overwhelmed, that they're done with the updates, or how do you find that balance?
Well, I think everybody's different, right? I mean, when I speak at our annual conference called EPIC, which stands for Empower People, Inspire Consciousness, I'm usually emotional. And I'm emotional because I'm releasing something or revealing something that is incredibly personal and I'm passionate about, right? And some people relate to that very well, and some people not so well. Because some people are not comfortable with emotion. They're not comfortable with authenticity, especially in a business environment. Now, I will tell you, after you're here a few years, you get really comfortable with it and you strive for it, right? So I think sometimes people are like, oh my God, is that the CEO up there and he's tearing up? Oh my God, this is very uncomfortable. And other people go, yeah, that's our CEO, right? And so, but at the end of the day, it's not about the emotion. It's about me telling them, I'm not any different than you are, right? I have the same pains and same problems and same challenges and same, dysfunctional issues in my life. And I just happen to be the CEO, right? And so I never want to be what I call the Ken doll CEO, where, I have the perfect body. I've fought weight my whole life, and I talk about it. I have 4% body fat. Well, I don't. I'm married to the perfect woman who sings in the choir, and her name's Buffy, and she was a Delta Phi, and all these things that we think, geez, this is what our leaders are supposed to be. You know why? Because it's not real. It's not authentic. It's not real life. And, when you see these things on TV, it's like a, reality show. They're made up for Hollywood. The reality of the situation is CEOs have problems. CEOs have marital issues. CEOs have problems with their investors. CEOs have problems with their staff. CEOs can be jerks. They're just normal people that happen to be put in this job. And so the reality of the situation is I want to admit those things to people. So first of all, they feel like, hey, Dwayne's more like me than he's not like me. And second of all, that's the first step to developing a trust relationship. My kids I went to a birthday party at my kid's house, and yes, we social distance and wore a mask, but they had a TV outside, and there was this TV program playing. I can't remember. It was something about women who'd been married and started now divorced or widowed and finding a new relationship, right? So I'm sitting there while the birthday party is going on, and I get hooked into this reality show. It's like, oh my God. And the reality coach guy's telling them, well, the first thing you have to do to establish trust is to be vulnerable. You have to tell something about yourself that's painful and revealing, and you have to be vulnerable. And I'm like, well, exactly. That's my management, my vulnerability, because that's the first step. Because that's a risk, right? It's a risk to say, hey, let me tell you how I've struggled with my weight my whole life. And these are the pains that I've gone through or whatever. And first of all, you may have 50% of the audience going, exactly, I've had that exact problem. So there's a relationship, there's a kinship there. They go, oh my God, you too? I thought CEOs don't have weight problems. So all of a sudden, you have a relationship with these people, and that develops trust.
Going through COVID or any crisis, especially in the field that you work in where you've got mental health issues and things like that, you have to look at your staff and how vulnerable are they. And then now we have this new thing, I think they've called it Zoom fatigue, that's really crushing people. So talk to us a little bit about your commitment to health as a leader and how you get your employees and your staff to sort of buy into that and why it's so important.
I had an issue where I had a GI bleed. I ended up in the hospital, and I just started to write 30 Summers More. And I was bored as hell in the hospital, and told my wife, I cannot stay in here another day without doing something. And of course, they didn't want me to do anything. They wanted me to rest. And so I said, bring the, my edits of this book I'm writing. And I'd started 30 Summers More detailing my experiences with 80, 90, 100 plus year old people, right? And kind of detailing their best practices. And that was going to be my demographic. And I started reading it, I'm looking around at all these tubes and machines that are hooked up to me. And I'm like, my God, this is about people like me who worked 100 hours a week, don't really take good care of themselves. And, and here I am writing this book in this hospital, getting a blood transfusion. Isn't this ironic that I'm writing about living 30 summers more? And so it was like, a boulder fell out of the heavens and hit me on the noggin and said, wake up, buddy. First of all, you got to take care of yourself if you're going to tell other people how to do it. But second of all, this is your chance to get yourself on the right track. So, I went into that. I lost almost 50 pounds. But I spent 5 years writing this book, and it gave me some incredible knowledge. And I didn't want to write it just from, hey, these are the diet tips or these are the exercise tips. I wanted a holistic perspective. So I talked to Chinese medicine doctors. I put myself through weird experiments. I still do. As I was telling you on the interview before I got on a call, I took some massive supplements this morning. I wanted to see what they would do to my blood chemistry. It wasn't a good result. So I still put myself through these kind of crazy experiments to see, hey, does this have a positive or negative effect? And so that forced me to really see how my staff was doing. And the greatest gift I think a CEO can give to people is help, is really to say, okay, I want to help you. My best friend in about year 3 of writing this book, my best friend of 20 years came to me, and he just turned 70 years old. And I noticed that he gained weight. And I said, how much do you weigh? And he's told the story many times, so he doesn't mind me telling it. And he says, I weigh 294 pounds. Now he's tall, he's 6'2". And I looked at him and I said, you know what? 70 and 294 should not be used in the same sentence. And he agreed with me. And I said, you know, if you want, I will coach you. And he's lost about 65 pounds now. And he has never felt better. He looks like a totally different person. He spends about 4 hours working on a farm a day now. He couldn't have spent 15 minutes before. And so a lot of these things, and again, it's just not about diet. It's about meditation. It's about getting your blood sugars in control. It's about having purpose in life. It's about having a good companion. It's about what role spirituality factors into your health. In fact, there was, I think it was in either Wall Street Journal or New York Times, an article that said the secrets of living a long life just this week. And almost every one of those things was in my book. It was purpose. It was, you know, a good partner. It was spirituality. It was, you know, diet. It was exercise, things like meditation, community, keeping active, you know, all those things are in my book. And so again, I think the greatest gift a CEO can give anyone is just good health. And so we work continuously to do that and to give people not only the information, but support them in this health journey.
So I've got a question here. It's from Dan, and he wants to know specifically, with your senior leadership team or the employees, your core employees, what are you doing to encourage them to put their health or their immunity practices first right now so that they stay healthy and can actually do the work?
Yeah, first of all, we talk about it a lot, right? We talk about, you know, things like, you know, there's been studies with COVID that if you have a low vitamin D count, if your vitamin D is below, you know, 40, you tend to be low on the vitamin D count, and those people are more susceptible to serious injury or even death if you have a low vitamin D count. So go get your vitamin D checked, and you know, if you're under 40, it's problematic. I like to have mine above 60, and you know, some people say they like to have it as high as 80 or 100. So I think that's one thing we can do. I do a meditation class every 2 weeks. So for anyone, I lead the class on Zoom. And so I encourage anyone in the company who wants to be in that class to come in. It's taped. If they can't come in, they come back later. But there's usually 60 to 80 people live on that session that I lead a 40-minute meditation class. So, you know, that's important. You know, we talk about the things that help people from, you know, getting out of, you know, just movement. We've hired a woman called Starkle Nutrition that's doing immunity support food for our residents and staff. We've talked about Chinese herbs that are immunity protecting. We have had situations now where, you know, we want people to have good mental health. As I said before, we hired a psychiatrist. We do the Sphere series. There's more and more people talking about suicide, about how they're depressed, about, and again, vitamin D is a great way to relieve you of depression as well. If you have a vitamin D count of 22, your chance of depression is much, much higher than it was at 70. So vitamin D is a great way to fight off depression, but so is movement and exercise and appropriate diet. You know, you eat things that are bad caloric intake, you know, that can take your mood down and make you feel very heavy. So it's so many things that we do. You know, probably one of the greatest gifts, as I said earlier, that we did for our staff is this telemedicine. We use a company called 98.6. The point is spelled out, POINT. And, you know, people are terrified to go into the hospital, right? Even if they're having a heart attack, they don't want to go to the hospital. So what happens is they stay home, and we're finding more and more, you know, fatalities of people who didn't go to the hospital when they have to. I just read one the other day. A 38-year-old guy was having a heart attack and he wouldn't go. And finally the paramedics came after 8 hours of him going through cardiac arrest. and he passed away in their living room, 38 years old. And I mean, I saw a picture of him. He didn't look overweight. He didn't look bad. Obviously had some kind of genetic heart problem. So, telemedicine, I mean, you can go online, a doctor pops up on your screen within 3 minutes, and, it's pre-programmed, all your information, your health history, your medications. That's a gift. And it costs like $2 a month. So why everybody in the world's not doing this, I don't know.
So that's a great question. And I want to bring one in here. Simone is asking, what if the company you're with or your leadership team doesn't have the budget to do all these things that you're saying, right? Are there DIY options, or how do you even get to a place where you can lead in this way? Are there steps? How do you get there?
Well, first of all, the CEO has to be committed to their staff mental health and wellness and physical health, right? How much does it cost for me to do a Zoom call for 80 employees on meditation? Again, the cost of the telehealth is like $2 a month. I mean, so you don't have to be a zillionaire to do that. I have extra food, that I make for my residents. It doesn't cost me a fortune to send a family of 4 home food for $1. So I think what it costs is desire. I think the CEO, you have to have the initial desire. You have to have the want to do it for your employees. And then you have to be creative. And again, last, you have to listen and say, what are your issues? Where can I help, right? And often, your management just thinks they know the answers and tries to give them solutions that are not valuable. One of the things I would say is go through all the benefits that you do give and see what people value. Oftentimes, and we do this every year, oftentimes you're offering a benefit that has no value. It may be, a gym membership that you say, hey, we'll pay 50% of your gym membership. And you have 2,000 employees and you say, well, 8 people are taking that, but we're paying this gym, a contract to do that. Well, you could take that number that you're allocated to that and reallocate it and maybe come up with something that 500 people will participate in. So, before COVID, we were doing Reiki sessions in our buildings. We were doing massage. Reflexology. We just try to be really creative about things that have an immediate value for employees that don't cost a lot.
Great points. I've got a question here from Edward, and he's very specific. He wants to know why you think other assisted living facilities or other healthcare facilities and organizations don't adopt the same things. Why is it this standard practice? Where is Aegis deciding that this has to be first?
Well, it's hard for me to get inside their head and answer for them, so I don't know that. I can only speculate that they're focused on the wrong things, right? As I said, I speak a lot at colleges and webinars and Zoom calls and stuff about leadership and culture. And I'll have people like the Vice President of Human Resources call me and say, Dwayne, will you talk to me about culture and leadership? And I said, no, I won't. And they're like, well, why are you being so rude? Why won't you talk to me? And I said, I'm happy to talk to your company, but I want you to have your CEO call me. And they said, well, why is that? And I said, well, because unless the CEO is absolutely passionate about doing these things, it will never filter down. It won't get launched. It will never happen. And so I don't mind talking to you, but I don't want to spend time talking to you about something that you don't have the ability to enact. So you have your CEO call me, and I tell you what, I would say 80% of the time they said, my CEO will never call you. They admit that. They're like, he or she is not on board with this. I'm just trying to do it. And I said, well, it'll never work then, right? Very, very, very few times does the CEO call me and talk to me about these things. It's happened, but I can count probably on one hand the number of times it's happened. So, and I get literally dozens of calls from people wanting me to tell them how to make it happen in their company. So unless the CEO is passionate about it and really has an authentic concern, and I just don't think most CEOs are hardwired that way. They don't sit down and say, hey, I want to listen. I mean, there's some great companies in Seattle that really listen to their employees. I think Starbucks does a great job. Costco does a great job. Nordstrom's does a great job. Some really good companies that listen to their employees. But not all companies, take that path.
Yeah, great point. And I think what I'm going to tie it around one last question here, and then we can open it up to some more Q&A. But what I've heard you, we've been talking about leadership in times of crisis. What I love about what you're saying is lead with vulnerability, but you're saying that works whether we're in crisis or not. Lead with commitment from the CEO level. Like if the CEO is not committed, then nothing really works in the company, but that's true in and out of crisis. And then you're focused on health and how your employees are functioning and feeling connected. But again, those things work all the time. When we talk right now about getting through a crisis, can you sum up what you think leaders right now, it doesn't matter what company they're in, really should be focusing on in the next 6 months, 18 months to get through this?
Well, I'm just going to comment on the first part of your narrative first, because, this shouldn't be like a first date with our employees. And what I mean by that is it's not, your first date, you get the best haircut, you dress up, and, your car's detailed, and, and you take them to the best restaurant. And the second date, it kind of goes downhill. And third, these things have to be in your leadership DNA, right? It's the consistency of these programs, whether it's about wellness, or whether it's about vulnerability, whether it's about trust, whether it's about safety. It's just got to be who you are. Because if you take a first date mentality to leadership and your employees, people are not going to trust you, right? They're going to go, oh, that was true when I first came to the company, but it's not true now. We used to do this a year ago. Now we don't do it now. Now we used to have these meetings. I really enjoyed them, and they fell off, right? It's the consistency that develops the relationship. So I think consistency is important. So don't take the first date mentality. With reference to what CEOs should do right now, there's a variety of things. First of all, life safety is more important now than it ever has been, right? And no profit, no share earnings, no stock report, nothing is worth the risk of risking one life, right? So you have to just be so focused on human life and, human contact and wearing masks and social distancing and disinfecting and, technology and all those things that you can do to just protect human life. So that should be way, way, way out in the front for anyone, any business. I don't care if you want a restaurant, a technology firm, or assisted living. That's got to be front and center. The second thing, because we're dealing in a complex situation right now, is you just need to sit back and listen. You just need to ask the questions, whether it's about Black Lives Matter, or whether it's about, immigration, or whether it's about politics and, which side of the aisle you're on. You sit back and listen. And, I like to think of, my 3,000 employees like a big family, where we get around the table and we say, hey, I value you disagreeing with me. I really do. I want to hear what you have to say. You don't have to align with my thinking. In fact, I want a company that's not of one opinion. I want a company that does disagree with me, because at the end of the day, we are all going to be better for it. Now, we're going to do that in a respectful way. We're going to do that in a professional way. And we're going to come out of the other side of this with some kind of stance on these difficult issues. That's what I think CEOs should do. You shouldn't sit in your boardroom with, your 5 key staff and say, hey, here's what we're going to do, without listening. It's probably the wrong answer if you do.
I'm going to circle back and remind everyone, on the screen there's a text code. You can do 30 SM and you'll get Dwayne's 2 downloads free and information on 30 Summers more. And I think just even the 2 downloads, Dwayne, are very indicative of what you're saying. One of them is about 36 micro habits. The other one's about a 10-point health assessment, things that you're doing in your company. I want to just wrap up. What do you want to say before we go into live Q&A here? What do you want to say right now as a leader? What do you think is the most important thing that people need to hear from you right now?
I think people just need to take a breath. I think we are all good people at our core. We all want basically the same things in life, right? We want our own safety. We want our kids to have good lives. We want to have some kind of success in our professional lives and so on. And I think right now people have a magnifying glass out for the differences between people, instead of some type of magnifying glass that finds the similarities, right? And I think that's what leadership does. it takes people with varying degrees of opinion and focuses on the similarities, not the differences. The differences makes the culture, the country, the business stronger, because you knit together a variety of opinions that come up with a very eclectic kind of end result. When I hire people, I like to hire people from really good companies, not from my industry. Rarely, if almost ever, do we hire people from our industry. But I love, love, love hiring people from, the Starbucks or the Amazons or the, Googles of the world, whatever. And I call it the making of the quilt. And what I mean by that is, if you think about a patchwork quilt, and one of the patches is Google, one of the patches is Microsoft, one of the patches is Ritz-Carlton, one of the patches is Four Seasons, and so on. All those companies have very different philosophies into how they manage and hire, recruit, train, perform service, develop products, whatever. But it's that intelligence that comes together that's united, and the assembly of that creates something very powerful. That's what leaders need to do. They need to take all the intelligence they have with their employees and assemble it in something that's a very powerful forward-moving force. And again, right now, people are focusing too much on our differences and not enough on our similarities and our strengths.
Love that. Love that. Okay, we're going to go and take some questions. Thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Assuming everyone can hear us, thank you for your great questions. I wanted to point out that a couple of weeks ago, Dwayne and I recorded this interview and got some great feedback, and thought, let's share it with you guys and take some new questions. And so I hope you enjoyed the information so far, and that you asked questions even throughout. So Dwayne, I'm going to jump right in because we've got a list here. So
jump.
Yeah, I'm going to start first with Taisha, and I'm hoping I'm saying your name right. So Taisha wants to know what advice that you would give to a young entrepreneur who wants to get into this industry specifically, and what's the emphasis? Like, what advice should she focus on?
Well, it's a turbulent time in our industry, and thanks, Taisha, for sending that question in. I think it depends on, if you're talking about on a staff level, if you're talking about starting your own assisted living company, if you're talking about, being a general manager or executive director of a building. I would say right now, the need for entry-level employees is higher than it ever has been, right? And healthcare, especially domestic healthcare, is an incredible field to get into in terms of when you have an economic downturn. So whenever you have an economic downturn, domestic healthcare usually flourishes, and we would fall into that category. The one piece of advice I would give you is, if you go to work for a company, make sure you do your homework. This is as important as the partner you pick to marry. So research them, look at their Glassdoor scores, look at their Yelp reviews, talk to other people in the company, really, really do a good job of vetting that company, because that becomes part of your history. And if you choose a bad company to work for, that says something about you, and it's going to hurt you in the future.
Great advice. And Taisha does have a follow-up question, Dwayne, but I'm going to kind of go in order. There's a lot of questions here coming through.
Sure.
Kim writes and says that she just had to put her mother in an acute rehab facility, and she's asking what's the best way to communicate with OT and PT staff to get updates.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming, Kim, that those OT and PT staff are part of the community and not brought in from the outside. If that's the case, I think every community, I'm assuming she's in a rehab skilled nursing facility. If that's the case, you have to put that burden on the executive director and the nursing staff to give you constant updates. We overburden our family members with updates. I think families we give daily updates with people. And our family started saying, that's a little bit overboard, But I view this as, now more than ever, you need to over communicate. So we try to do that. So I would just call the executive director, the head of the skilled nursing facility, and I'd say, let me tell you my expectations about OT and PT and the updates. Here they are. I want an update. I want a picture of my mom going through PT. I want whatever. But give them your expectations. And if they don't meet your expectations, there's lots of options.
Great advice. I'm going to jump to Thomas, and this, Dwayne, I think this question could be its own webinar, so I'm going to have you focus in on the hot tips here. But what was Aegis most prepared for when the pandemic hit, and then what were they least prepared for?
Oh, that's a great question, Thomas. Thank you. Well, I think what we were most prepared for, and what I'm super proud of, is we had PPE on hand. Because we have norovirus and various flus in the building, various things. We had probably a couple months of PPE for every building in the entire company. What I'm also very proud of is that we took action very early. We self-quarantined far before the states or the government told us we had to. We locked down our buildings a couple weeks before, and we signed process owner for, I think, as I said earlier in the webinar, for communication, for technology, infectious control, working with the CDC, working with the press, and so on. So we had probably 8 different process owners that we jumped into this. We had a process owner for PPE. Today, we have 7.5 months worth of PPE. And that gives everyone such great comfort about, staying in touch and protecting them and keeping them safe. And it's really cut down in terms of our COVID cases, and it's almost eliminated deaths with residents because of the PPE. What are the things we were least prepared for?
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say a pandemic, right? I mean, who would have known this ugly virus would come into our buildings? And again, our patient zero was February 28th. If you go back to the history of COVID, February 28th was the date of the very first death in the United States, not in Aegis, not in Seattle, but the very first death in the United States. So that's when our patient zero entered the building. It happened to be a staff member of ours that was involved in a nursing program that mingled a bunch of some other nurses we even think maybe was involved in the Kirkland Life Care nursing staff. They may have been in a class together. So we got hit very early, and that virus travels so fast, and we weren't ready for that. We weren't prepared to see this thing because it wasn't public then.
Wow. Great stuff. I see John just asked a question, but I'm going to put that one right below Cynthia, just in order. Cynthia wants to know that you are potentially working around this microbiome and having a healthy microbiome as it relates to health and perhaps specifically COVID, and just is wondering your thoughts around community living and diet as it relates to that.
Well, that's a very good question. It's very complex, right? So when I wrote 30 Summers More, I went to what's called the Buck Center, and the Buck Center is doing some very interesting microbiome works around fruit flies and various other things. And essentially, for those of you not familiar with it, a lot of this has to do with gut health, right? And what lives in your tummy, and how that keeps you healthy and productive and energetic, and your immune system healthy, and so on. There's a variety of ways I can take this question, but suffice to say, I mean, I personally work with a company called Starkle Nutrition, Julie Starkle out of Seattle. She's a brilliant nutritionist. And so I do a variety of things personally to keep my gut health, which I don't have great gut health, so I have to really watch it. And then, 2 months ago, we contracted her to actually create immune boosting food to help fight COVID. So, I mean, things simple like, bone broth is a great immune increasing food. So there's lots and lots of things you could do. And, I'd be happy to talk to you more about that offline, because there's so many ways to answer that. I think the exclamation point that I would put on your question is, now more than ever, you should be motivated to be healthy. And so what does that mean? Stop eating garbage. Don't drink a lot. Don't smoke. Move your body. Get good sleep. Because if you do get hit with COVID, and I've had about 30 friends that have hit with it, and numerous staff and numerous residents, if you're healthy, you're probably going to do okay if you get a small viral dose. If you get a large viral dose, it may be another issue.
Great. I want to remind everyone, if you're on the webinar, you're going to get 2 of Dwayne's ebooks that cover a lot of your health tips in there. And then also 30 Summers More. I know you go really deep into some of your health practices that you've incorporated into Aegis. So we've got a barrage of questions here. I'm going to try to see if I can tie a couple of them together to make it easier for you, Dwayne. But Antoine's asking, when you talk about listening, how do you encourage your team to speak freely, when they maybe came from a culture that didn't allow that? How do you make that transition?
It's a really good question, Anton, because I think we bring the mentality of our former companies into our existing companies. And so if you're coming from a company where, pardon the expression, you were whipped hard when you gave your opinion, you're probably going to have some trepidation about, can I speak freely here? Is it real? Whatever. So we have to do that. We have to solicit that information in a variety of ways. We have a survey company called Quilt that many of you may have used. We just did it last week. We've got a tremendous response. Normally on surveys, if you get 30, 35, 40% response rate, you're doing phenomenal. We got 69% response rate. Normally staff will make 1 or 2 comments. Each of our staff made 4 comments. So huge amount of comments. We had over 5,000 comments that were made. And so you have to solicit that information in various ways. I offer my phone number to anyone who wants to call me. I don't care if you're a part-time dishwasher or you've been a nurse for 30 years. Call me, tell me if I'm doing something wrong. And I promise you, I will do something wrong. I will screw up. I will make a mistake. I work for my staff. And I think, they're my boss, they're my customers. And so I think a lot of times CEOs have this, these are my employees, I got to tell them what to do, whatever. I don't really look at it that way. I look at it at a standpoint of, hey, if I can't delight my employees, they're not going to do the job they're supposed to do, right? So if you come to work and you're miserable, you're going to take that misery to the first customer. And who does the residents come in most contact with? The care managers, right? So, or who does the family member come in first contact with? The concierge. If those people are not delighted, I've failed, right? So I got to delight those people and make them skip to work.
Got it. Great. And so I'm going to combine a question from Antoine, from Steve, and from John. Again, big question. What they're asking is, how has COVID impacted your plans with Aegis in terms of growing and bigger? How has it affected occupancy and your sales programs? And really, what lessons are you learning to change how you're leading now, right, with this? So I guess it's, where's Aegis going?
Lots of questions. Yeah. Well, let me give you some industry statistics. The industry pre-COVID was about 87.8% occupied in the entire nation. So if you took all the senior housing companies, said, what's your overall occupancy? It was 87.8. Aegis's occupancy corporate-wide was 92.9, so almost 93%. So we were 5% above the industry. Now, the industry has dropped to, the last report I saw was 79.8%. So they've dropped, almost 9%. Aegis today is 90%. So we're 2.3% above where the industry average was pre-COVID. We're 2.9% below our highest number, but we're not 8%. And we're gaining ground. I will tell you, we report census every Friday. 5 of our last 7 weeks have been an uptick in census. And I think the reason for that is when this thing started, people were looking and saying, I'll bring mom home. This is going to last 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be just like Christmas vacation. We can handle it. Well, now in month 5, when the family or the husband or the wife's dealing with mom who has dementia, they're going, I can't do this one more day, right? Or mom's up in the middle of the night. I can't sleep. I can't take care of my kids and my mom both. So we're seeing a lot of those need-driven people coming to our buildings. How's it affected us? I think bank financing has dried up. Now I think that's a very temporary situation, but long-term, like construction financing has shriveled. And so, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're often referred to as the #1 senior housing customer. So all the major banks, when we call, we get the best rates, the best deals, everything. I think, right now, what we're trying to do is cobble together a couple deals so we can get them off. I think by January, February, I think the banking situation will lift off again. And then, the last thing I'd say is how COVID's changed. It's completely changed us, from the way we design buildings to the way we have staff. We have increased nursing staff. We've always wanted to become a wellness company and pivot to that. We're not going to be an assisted living company. We're going to be a wellness company. We're going to teach people how to live better and live longer. And that's one of the goals that we have. And a lot of the information in the 5 years that I spent writing 30 Summers More are going to be put into Aegis. And we're going to say, hey, you can not only live a better quality of life, but you can live a longer life if you do these 27 things. So lots of changes.
Great stuff. So Dwayne, we're getting lots of questions here. Again, I'm going to try to combine several questions into one and see how you do with it. We've got Corey asking, what motivates you right now? Taisha is saying that she's buying a building, a company, and she wants to know what your advice is to build out for the first 100 days if you're going to go into assisted living. Cynthia wants to know, you as a leader, how are you prioritizing what you pay attention to? And with so much going on in the assisted living, like how do you prioritize? And then literally, I have Pantia asking, as an architect, what would you want to see architects focusing on in terms of building new communities? So they kind of all go together.
Well, not really, but let me try to answer them. So let me get Pantia's question. Thanks, Pantia, for reaching out. I think you're going to see more protected outdoor spaces than ever before. Whether it's through visitation. And let me just give you my opinion on COVID. And I have people that are working inside of the White House, and I have people that are inventing vaccines, and I have people that I talk to daily that are virologists that are tracking the virus. So I'm pretty plugged into how things are going. I think we will have a vaccine by the end of the year. Now, here's the problem. We're going to need more than one kind of vaccine because especially with elderly, a vaccine is essentially you're developing some type of antibodies to repel the disease. Well, to do that, you have to have an immune system that supports the vaccine and then allows your body to build the antibodies. For elderly, they give them what's called an adjuvant, okay? And adjuvant is a stimulator of the immune system so that it can accept the vaccine. That's very different than just a vaccine. So I think we're going to have to develop adjuvant vaccines for our elderly. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 90 days or even by the end of the year. And there's other practical things, talking to people at the Fred Hutch and the Gates Foundation. We need about 500 million syringes and needles, okay? There's not currently 500 syringes and needles in stock, okay? That's just a practical thing. Now, there are oral vaccines that are being developed right now. So if we get oral vaccines, then we may alleviate that question. So I just wanted you guys to have that background because I think we're going to live with this for 12 to 18 months. That's my point. With regard to the architecture, I think you're going to have more, and depending on where the weather patterns are and what geographic location you have, you're going to be more outdoor spaces. You're going to have to design what we call Zoom rooms, with huge TVs where people, they can isolate, they can visit with their family. I think you're going to have to design things where what we call the hugging wall that has 3 sets of sleeves, kind of for the tall guy, the woman, and the little child. And so you can sit and hold hands with someone through this screen. I think masks are going to be huge for a long time. I just read an article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, that they said they think masks are being around for 10 years. So if you're in the mask business, you got a long runway. I think you're going to look at things. We're in business in partnership with a company called Molecule, Molekule. That's a filtering system that they've got a letter of encouragement from the FDA that says this looks very promising for fighting the virus. It doesn't say it kills the virus. It says it's a letter of encouragement that it looks promising. And they don't have enough data on that. So we've partnered with them because we did a lot of exploration on filtering, and theirs looks the most promising. We have hydrostatic guns that we use that we go in and you can spray this in someone's face, and because of the way it works, it actually kills the virus. We're exploring good UV light. So there's a lot of gimmicky UV light, and there's good UV light. So we're looking at those things. So, Tara, I would tell you that those are some of the things that are probably going to be incorporated. I don't know that we're going to build temperature scanners in our front door, but those are some of the things that we're looking at. Charlie, refresh me on some of those other questions. All right, what motivates me? You're muted, Charlie, too, so you know. So what motivates me? I have a variety of companies that I own a film company. I like to write. I've written 6 books. I've done 12 movies as a producer. I wrote a play that has been traveling. I'm working on 2 movies right now. Most of them are social justice movies. In fact, all 12 are social justice movies. I like to write, and I love the creative aspect. I love to build. So I'm a huge, whether it's for my own use, building things, or we have 9 or 10 projects that are being built right now for Aegis, about probably 700 million in development and construction. So I love to do that. So I'm a collector. I have hobbies. You can see if you look at my video, I'm in a part of my house called the sports room, at the top of the ceiling with 200 and some Hall of Fame signed baseballs. And so I'm a collector of sports objects and other things. So that all those things are fun and motivate me. But I'm very goal oriented. So I love taking something from scratch to accomplishment.
Wow. So you get motivated by a lot, a lot of things. I think the final 2 questions, I feel like we could take questions all day, and I super appreciate everyone chiming in. And I think as a leader right now, I think I just want to speak to, there's so many people that are now having to reinvent themselves. They can't be in the industry they were. They have to either go get educated or join a company. Should they be looking at assisted living? And then as a leader, do you have to change how you lead these people that are being reinvented? Maybe if they're in the hotel industry and they come to Aegis, is that okay? How do leaders help with the reinvention of these employees?
Well, let's speak to the hotel question first, because I think it's, and just so you guys know, Aegis hires very, very, very few people from assisted living. If I were, in terms of our managers and leaders, if I were to give it a percentage, it'd be less than 5%, which is pretty shocking to most people. The overwhelming majority of people we hire are from 5-star hotel companies, because we want somebody classically trained in service, and the customer experience, and the way a building looks, and those kinds of things. And then we will train them for 100 days in our industry, and then we'll mentor them and give them a big brother or big sister, and get them oriented to our industry. I can tell you, in the last 90 days, 2 years ago, we would beg people from the hotel industry to come work for us, and they'd say, "That's not a very sexy industry. God, I'm working at a 5-star hotel. Everybody knows who I am. Blah blah blah." Now, in the last 90 days, we've gotten more applications, phone calls, inquiries from 5-star hotel managers than probably in the last 5 years. And obviously, when you have a company like Marriott that's furloughed 80% of their staff, or Ritz-Carlton, which is part of Marriott, or Four Seasons, one and only, I can go to the line, Mandarin Oriental, all these people are being let go. And so I think assisted living is a very good option. I think, again, the issue is make sure you choose the right company, because not all of them are equal. And just because they say they're doing senior housing, they may not be a great company. So do your due diligence. In regards to how you lead, I think it's incumbent on CEOs and leaders now to have more empathy, to have more listening skills, and to have more sensitivity to staff than ever before, right? People are going through really hard times. People are dying, I've known half a dozen people who have passed away. My own brother passed away at 73 years of old age in April. And they said it was pneumonia. We think it was probably COVID. So, this is hard stuff. This is, you can't hug your children. You can't hug your grandchildren. You can't, and what do we do when we're stressed out? Well, we go to a sporting event, we go to a concert, you go to a bar, you go dancing, all those things are gone, right? So stress lives inside of us. And that's why we're huge proponents of getting counseling. We're huge proponents of, having psychiatrists come on and talk to our employees. We're huge components of meditation. We're huge components of, exercise and so on. So I think my leadership tip for all of you guys is you need to be sensitive. You need to listen more and care more than you ever did before, and make people feel safe. And if you do that, we'll get through this. We'll get through this together. If we all lock arms and are sensitive to each other, we'll be in a better place here in the near future.
Dwayne, I super appreciate that. I want to thank you for your time. I know everyone here is really appreciative. I want to remind everyone that you can text or get downloaded the different resources we have. You can find Dwayne on social media, Instagram, where a lot of your leadership and your health and wellness tips are shared daily and weekly. So I think we could have you for 3 hours, but I just want to encourage everyone, if you have more questions, Instagram and Facebook are a great place to connect and see what Dwayne's talking about and how he's leading. So really appreciate everyone's time. And Dwayne, you've got a farewell. What are you going to say?
Oh, stay safe, stay healthy, wear your mask. Please wear your mask. Don't kill anyone. Wear your mask. So those are my parting words. Stay safe. Let's all get through this together and love on each other.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.